The airport was busy. People were walking fast, rushing to catch their flights. Some were sipping coffee, while others looked tired and annoyed. It was just another normal day at Gate 12, but no one knew that something unforgettable was about to happen. A tall black man in a sharp navy blue suit walked slowly toward the boarding line. His face was calm, peaceful, but strong. He had kind eyes, clean shoes, and moved like someone who had nothing to prove. He carried only one small bag and a first-class ticket in his hand. His name was Mr. Jordan. He walked with quiet confidence, but as he neared the boarding gate, the man standing there, Mark, a white flight attendant, narrowed his eyes. Mark didn't smile. In fact, he looked annoyed. "Excuse me, sir," Mark said, holding up a hand. "Economy is that way." Mr. Jordan stopped. He looked at Mark, then gently raised his boarding pass. "This says first class." Mark didn't even glance at the ticket. He just shook his head. "That's not possible. First class is for premium travelers." A few passengers nearby turned to watch. Some raised eyebrows. One man chuckled. Mr. Jordan stayed calm. "I know. That's why I'm here." Mark frowned. "Sir, I think you're lost. Please step aside and let real first-class passengers through." The words hit like a slap, but Mr. Jordan didn't raise his voice. He simply looked at Mark for a long second, then said in a low, respectful tone, "Is there a problem with my ticket?" Mark finally snatched the ticket from his hand. He looked at it, and for a split second, his face changed. It was valid. It was first class. But instead of apologizing, Mark cleared his throat and said, "Wait here. I need to check something." Mr. Jordan stood quietly, not moving, not arguing. People behind him began whispering, "Why are they treating him like that? Looks like he has a real ticket. They're making a scene for nothing." But Mark walked away, pretending to check something, clearly stalling. Another flight attendant, Sarah, walked over. She was younger and she looked confused. "Is everything okay, sir?" "I'm just trying to board," Mr. Jordan said politely. She took the ticket from him and scanned it. It beeped green. "Sir, you're good to go. Please come in." But before Mr. Jordan could move, Mark came back. "No," Mark said quickly. "There's a seating issue. He needs to wait." Sarah looked at the screen. "No, there's no issue. Seat 1A is available. He's cleared." Mark lowered his voice, but not low enough. "He doesn't look like first class," he muttered. Mr. Jordan heard him. So did Sarah. And now, so did everyone else standing nearby. The air grew heavy, silent, cold. Passengers looked uncomfortable. One older lady with silver hair stepped forward. "Excuse me, are you saying he can't board because of how he looks?" Mark's eyes darted. No, I'm just doing my job." But it was clear. Everyone saw it. Mr. Jordan looked at Sarah. "Is it okay if I board now?" She nodded firmly. "Of course, sir. I'm very sorry." Mr. Jordan gave her a small nod, then slowly walked past Mark without saying another word. He entered the jet bridge, disappearing inside the plane. But the moment stayed behind. People kept whispering. Inside the plane, Mr. Jordan stood in front of the first-class section. He looked at his seat. 1A. But someone was already sitting there, a businessman in a suit typing on a laptop. "I believe that's my seat," Mr. Jordan said kindly. The man looked up. He glanced at Mr. Jordan, then back at the flight crew. Mark came in from behind. "It's fine. He can take the empty seat in the back," Mark said quickly. Mr. Jordan didn't move. He didn't argue. He simply looked at the seat, then slowly turned around and said, "That's okay. I'll sit in economy." Mark smiled as if he had won something, but others didn't smile. Some looked confused. Some looked angry. One woman pulled out her phone and started recording. Mr. Jordan walked calmly down the aisle. He found a seat. In economy, sat down and looked out the window. He didn't complain. He didn't speak. He just breathed. 30 minutes later, the plane took off. The engines roared, and the plane climbed through the clouds. But the energy inside the plane had changed. A few rows ahead, a teenager with long braids was scrolling through her phone. She had seen Mr. Jordan's name on his boarding pass. Curious, she typed it into Google. Within seconds, her eyes widened. She tapped her mom. "Mom, do you know who that man is?" The mother leaned over, looked at the screen, and gasped. Photo of Mr. Jordan in uniform appeared. General Nathaniel Jordan, former U.S. Special Forces commander, Medal of Honor, decorated war hero. The girl turned pale. They made him sit in economy? Another man nearby overheard. Soon, the whisper spread. From one seat to the next, the story traveled. Everyone on that flight was about to find out that the man they disrespected was not just anyone. He was someone powerful, someone respected, someone who had sacrificed for his country, and now he sat quietly in the back of the plane, while the man who tried to humiliate him thought the story was over. But the story was just getting started. The plane moved quietly through the sky, but the tension inside the cabin was louder than the engines. Mr. Jordan sat by the window in economy class. He didn't complain. He didn't look upset. He just looked out at the clouds, calm and still. But behind the calm was something deeper. A few rows up, the teenage girl who had searched his name whispered again to her mom. "Mom, he's not just a general. He's a national hero. He saved soldiers during war." Her mother shook her head slowly. "And they made him sit back here? Because of his skin?" More passengers were starting to find out. A man in a suit Googled Mr. Jordan's name. Then another. Then another. Phones lit up quietly. Eyes grew wide. The cabin was changing, but at the front of the plane, Mark, the flight attendant, still smiled like nothing had happened. He stood with another crew member laughing quietly. Can you believe he actually thought he belonged in first class? Mark said. The other crew member shrugged. Did you see that suit, though? He looked serious. Mark rolled his eyes. So? Anyone can buy a suit. Doesn't mean he's important. They laughed. But they didn't notice the woman in seat 3C, who heard everything. She wasn't smiling. Back in economy, Mr. Jordan reached into his bag and pulled out a small photo. He looked at it gently. It was a picture of a young man in military gear, his son. He stared at it for a moment, remembering. Flashback begins. The sun was hot, the desert winds strong. Mr. Jordan, in full uniform, was helping carry a wounded soldier through a battlefield. Explosions shook the ground around him. Keep moving, he shouted. We leave no one behind. He dragged 2 men to safety that day, risked his life. Took a bullet in the shoulder but didn't stop. He had led the mission that saved 27 soldiers. Flashback ends. Now, years later, that same man sat in economy, treated like he didn't belong, and yet he said nothing. Mark walked down the aisle, pretending not to look at Mr. Jordan, but when he passed, he let out a quiet laugh. You look comfortable back here, he muttered under his breath. Mr. Jordan slowly turned and met his eyes. I'm more comfortable in war zones than around. Men who judge others by skin, he said quietly. Mark blinked. What did you say? Mr. Jordan said nothing else. He just turned his head back toward the window. Mark's smile faded. For the first time, something didn't feel right. Back in first class, Sarah, the kind flight attendant, got a notification on her phone. It was a news alert. The headline read, General Nathaniel Jordan spotted on commercial flight. Why was he in economy? She gasped. She turned to the captain and showed him the screen. The captain's eyes widened. You're telling me he's that Jordan? She nodded. We need to fix this. Now. But it was too late. Passengers were whispering, taking photos, sharing posts. The story was already spreading, fast. As the plane flew forward, so did the truth, and the man who had been judged, was about to be respected by the whole world. But the crew who mocked him, their moment of shame was only just beginning. The airplane floated through the sky, but inside the cabin, everything had changed. The mood wasn't quiet anymore. It was heavy, filled with whispers, looks, and a strange feeling in the air. People were still learning the truth. In row 6, the man in glasses leaned over to the woman beside him. "You see that guy back in economy?" She nodded. "The one the crew embarrassed?" He held out his phone. "That's General Nathaniel Jordan. He's one of the highest-ranked soldiers in the country." Her mouth dropped open. "Wait, that Jordan?" He nodded. "The one who rescued his team during that ambush in Iraq. The guy who led a peace mission in Africa. He even advised 2 U.S. presidents." The woman looked back down the aisle, shocked. "And they treated him like nothing?" More. Passengers were whispering now, "He's a war hero. I think he has a Medal of Honor. Why didn't he speak up?" In first class, Mark stood by the drink station, still unaware of the storm forming behind him. He smiled as he poured drinks. "Some people just want attention," he muttered. But he didn't know. People had started recording. The woman in 3C, who had heard Mark's earlier joke, had her phone out. She whispered to her husband, "He's going to regret what he said." She hit record. At the front of the plane, the captain stepped out of the cockpit. He looked serious. "Where is he?" he asked Sarah. Sarah pointed down the aisle. "Seat 14A." The captain nodded. "I'm going to speak with him." Back in economy, Mr. Jordan sat still. He looked at the sky outside the window, quiet as always. He hadn't touched his drink. He hadn't said a word. But then, the captain approached. "Excuse me, sir?" The captain said softly. Mr. Jordan looked up. "I just found out who you are," the captain said, "and I want to personally apologize for everything that's happened." Mr. Jordan nodded. "Thank you, but there's no need." The captain looked nervous. "We would be honored to move you to first class." Mr. Jordan paused. People nearby were watching, holding their breath. He finally said, "I think I'll stay here. Some lessons are better learned when they're uncomfortable." The captain lowered his head. "Yes, sir. Understood." Mark, still unaware, finally noticed something was wrong. He saw Sarah speaking to the captain. He saw people recording. And then he saw the headline on someone's phone as he walked past. "Airline staff disrespects Black War hero. Video goes viral." His face went pale. He stopped walking. His heart started racing. What video?" he whispered to himself. Back in first class, passengers who once smiled at Mark now turned away. Some shook their heads. Others looked disgusted. The seats felt colder now, the space quieter. The laughter was gone. And Mr. Jordan? He didn't move. He didn't smile. He just sat in silence, calm, strong, and full of grace. Because he knew the world had already started watching. And the truth? It always finds its way to the surface. By now, half the plane knew who Mr. Jordan really was. But the man who disrespected him, Mark, was only starting to realize the truth and the danger of his own actions. In first class, Mark's hands were shaking. He sat on a jump seat near the curtain, refreshing his phone again and again. Then it popped up, clear as day. "Airline staff stops black man from boarding first class. Turns out he's a decorated general." His face turned white. Thousands of views already, hundreds of comments. And then his name appeared in one of the replies. "Flight attendant Mark H. This your behavior?" His heart dropped. Back in economy, Mr. Jordan remained in seat 14A, still silent. A little boy in the row across from him tapped his mom on the arm. "Mom, is that man really a soldier?" The mother nodded. "Not just a soldier. He's a hero." The boy looked at Mr. Jordan in awe, then said softly, "He's like Captain America." Mr. Jordan heard that. He smiled just a little. Meanwhile, in the cockpit, the captain was on the phone with the airline's regional manager. "I want this handled the right way," the captain said. "We disrespected someone who gave his life to this country. We need to make this right." The voice on the other end was firm. "Understood. Have him meet our team when the plane lands, and make sure that crew member is reported. In the B..." Back, Sarah, the kind attendant, walked up to Mr. Jordan with a warm smile. "I just want to say thank you," she said. "For what?" he asked gently. "For being patient, for not shouting. You could have embarrassed him back, but you didn't." Mr. Jordan shook his head. "Shouting doesn't fix hearts. Sometimes silence teaches louder than words." Meanwhile, Mark finally stood up. He fixed his collar and walked toward the back of the plane. Some passengers glared at him, others whispered. When he reached Mr. Jordan's row, he stopped. Mr. Jordan didn't look up. Mark cleared his throat. I didn't know who you were," he said quietly. Mr. Jordan finally looked at him, calm and firm. "And if I wasn't who I am, would you still treat me that way?" Mark couldn't answer. He just stood there, frozen. "Respect," Mr. Jordan said, "should not depend on rank, title, or skin color." Mark swallowed hard. "You're right." Mr. Jordan looked out the window again. "You don't need to say more. Just change." Up front, the little girl who had searched his name earlier was now drawing something on a napkin. She finished it, folded it, and walked down to Mr. Jordan's seat. She handed it to him and smiled. He opened the napkin. It was a drawing of him with a cape like a superhero, standing tall above the clouds. 3 words were written at the bottom: "Thank you, hero." For the first time, Mr. Jordan's eyes watered. He folded the napkin gently and placed it in his coat pocket. The plane began to descend, but as it lowered toward the ground, the story was rising in the skies above. The world was watching. And justice? It had only just begun. The plane was minutes away from touching down, but the story inside was already flying across the internet. News outlets had picked it up. Social media was exploding, and people were beginning to ask, who disrespected General Jordan? Mark stood in the crew area, his heart racing. Every second, his phone buzzed with new messages. He had tried to delete his social media accounts, but it was too late. Screenshots had already spread. Videos had gone viral. Faces were named, and his was front and center. In the cockpit, the captain spoke calmly to the passengers. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be landing shortly. Please stay seated and buckle up." But inside, he was thinking about what would happen once they reached the gate. The airline had already arranged a welcome team and an apology. Mr. Jordan, still in seat 14A, sat quietly as the plane descended. The little girl who had given him the napkin peeked back through the seats to smile at him. He nodded, then he looked around. People weren't avoiding eye contact anymore. They were looking at him with respect, with honor, with shame for what had been done to him. The wheels touched the ground. The brakes hissed. And just like that, the flight was over. But the moment wasn't. As the passengers stood to gather their things, a man in first class whispered to his wife, "We're in history now. That man's story will be told everywhere." She nodded. "And that flight attendant? His career might be over." Mark stood by the exit door, pale and sweating. He didn't even know if he could speak to Mr. Jordan again, but he knew he had to face him one more time. The doors opened. A group of uniformed airline staff waited outside. Some wore suits. One held a bouquet. Another had a letter in hand. They weren't here for Mark. They were waiting for General Jordan. Passengers stepped off slowly. Some paused to shake Jordan's hand. One woman said, "My father served too." "Thank you," another man whispered. "I'm sorry we didn't speak up sooner." Jordan nodded each time. Calm, humble, silent. When he reached the exit, Sarah gave him a gentle look. "I hope the world learned something today," she said. He looked at her and replied, "It starts with one person choosing to be better." Then, he stepped off the plane. The airline staff greeted him. A senior director extended a hand. "General Jordan," he said, "on behalf of the entire airline, we deeply apologize. What happened on that plane is not who we are." Mr. Jordan didn't smile, but he shook the man's hand. "I hope not," he said. A reporter standing nearby raised her phone. "General, would you like to say something to the public?" He looked at the cameras for the first time, then said, "I don't need fame. I don't want revenge. I want respect for every man, every woman, no matter their color, their clothes, or their seat number." The reporters went silent. That one sentence would go on to be quoted everywhere. Inside the plane, Mark sat alone now. No passengers, no smiles, no cameras, just silence. He looked out the window and whispered to himself, "I thought he was no one. Turns out I was the one who had nothing." By the time General Jordan stepped off the plane, the world already knew what had happened, and now it was reacting. News stations across the country played the story. Decorated Black War hero disrespected on commercial flight. Passenger denied first class due to race. Turns out he's a 3-star general. Social media was on fire. Hashtags like Respect General Jordan, Flying While Black, and Firemark were trending in every country. People weren't just upset. They were angry. Celebrities posted. Veterans shared their support. Even politicians gave statements. One U.S. senator tweeted, "General Jordan has served our country with honor. He deserves more than just an apology. He deserves our respect, always." In a small home miles away, Mr. Jordan's son, now a teacher, watched the news. His eyes filled with tears. "That's my dad," he whispered. His young daughter looked up. "He's famous now?" He smiled. "He always was. The world's just finally seeing it." Meanwhile, at airline headquarters, the pressure was building fast. The CEO held an emergency press conference. "We are truly sorry for what happened," she said. "We are launching a full investigation and making changes immediately." But the public wasn't satisfied with just words. They wanted action. Back at the airport, Mark stood in a side hallway. He wasn't allowed to serve on the next flight. He had been suspended, for now. His manager stood in front of him, holding a file. "Do you understand why this happened?" the manager asked. Mark nodded slowly. "I judged a man by the way he looked." The manager didn't blink. "And that man turned out to be a national hero." Mark looked down. "I don't deserve this job anymore." The manager said nothing, then walked away. Across the city, Mr. Jordan was sitting quietly in a hotel lobby. He didn't want attention. He didn't want cameras. He just wanted peace. But peace wasn't coming yet. The hotel manager approached him nervously. "Sir, sorry to bother you, but someone from the mayor's office is here. They want to speak with you." Mr. Jordan sighed. Another public moment, another camera, another apology. He nodded and stood up, but what he didn't know was that this meeting would change everything, because behind the mayor's visit was an invitation that would shock even General Jordan himself. Mr. Jordan stood quietly in the hotel lobby. He had faced enemies in war zones. But today, he was facing something different: fame. The woman from the mayor's office stepped forward, holding a letter with a gold seal. "General Jordan," she said, her voice respectful, "the city would like to honor you formally." Jordan blinked. "Honor me? For what?" She smiled. "For reminding the world what quiet strength looks like, for choosing dignity over anger, for being a symbol of real leadership." Later that evening, a black car pulled up outside the city. Hall.News cameras clicked. Crowds waited with signs that read, "We stand with Jordan. Respect has no color. Not all heroes wear capes. Some wear medals." Inside, the mayor stood at the podium. When Mr. Jordan entered, the crowd stood and clapped. Long, loud, powerful. The mayor stepped forward and said, "Today we are not only apologizing, we are thanking a man who reminded us of our values, a man who didn't need a seat in first class to prove he was first class." He turned to Jordan. "Sir, with honor and pride, we present you with the key to the city." Jordan took the key, but spoke softly into the mic. "I accept this, not for myself, but for every person who's been judged too soon, spoken to too harshly, or treated like they didn't belong." The room went quiet, then thunderous applause. Meanwhile, Mark watched it all on his phone, alone in his apartment. He hadn't been back to work. He hadn't spoken to anyone in days. And now, watching Jordan being celebrated, he felt something he never expected: shame and admiration. He opened a blank email. To General Jordan, subject: "I'm sorry," he wrote. "I was wrong. I judged you. I failed you. I see it now, and I want to change. Not just say sorry, but be different. If you ever speak to people about leadership or respect, I'll be the first to listen." He stared at it, then hit send. The next morning, a reply came from General Jordan. "We all fall. What matters is how we rise. If you're ready to rise, I'll help you." Mark stared at the message for a long time, then smiled, just a little, because forgiveness had found its way in. Weeks passed, but the story of what happened on Flight 207 didn't fade. Instead, it grew, not just as a viral moment, but as a movement. Schools played the video of General Jordan's speech. Churches shared it in sermons. Leaders from around the world quoted him. Respect shouldn't depend on rank, title, or skin color. The message was spreading far beyond airports. In one small classroom, a teacher wrote Jordan's name on the board. "Who knows who this is?" She asked. A little boy raised his hand. "He's the man who didn't yell, but made the world listen." The class nodded. That was his legacy now. Meanwhile, Mr. Jordan continued his quiet life. No interviews, no book deals. He didn't want fame. He just wanted change, and change had begun. One morning, he received a letter from the airline. Inside was something unexpected: a full scholarship fund in his name for underprivileged youth dreaming of flying. It was called the Jordan Wings Program. Tears filled his eyes. This was the kind of first class that mattered. And then something else arrived: an invitation from the Air Force Academy. They wanted him to speak to young cadets. He stood at the podium weeks later, looking out at a room full of future pilots. He said, "You will fly high in the sky, but never forget to stay grounded in who you are. Treat every passenger, no matter how they look, as someone who matters, because the most powerful flight you'll ever take is when you rise above hate." The Bayi cadets stood, applauded, saluted. Back home, Mark had started working at a community center, helping young people, listening more, judging less. He still remembered Mr. Jordan's words: "What matters is how we rise." And now, he was finally rising. The world had moved on from the headlines, but those who had witnessed the moment, those who had felt its weight, would never forget. Because what started with one seat, one insult, one quiet man, had turned into something far greater: a lesson for all, a reminder forever.